grief can twist the strongest of men into shadows of themselves. For Alexander Grant, one of New York's youngest and most successful millionaires, losing his wife during childbirth shattered a world he thought was unbreakable. He was 38, handsome in a quiet, brooding way, and had built an empire of real estate that stretched from Manhattan penthouses to sprawling estates in the Hamptons. Yet in his mansion on Riverside Drive, silence ruled. The only sound that broke it was the gentle cry of his newborn daughter, Clara, the child who cost him his wife, Isabella. For weeks, Alexander couldn't even look at Clara without feeling the sting of guilt. She had Isabella's dark hair, her button nose, her tiny hands, but she had also been the reason Isabella's heart stopped in that sterile hospital room. Every time Clara cried, it was as if the echo of his wife's last scream rang in his ears. That's why he hired a nanny, not just any nanny, he wanted the best. Agencies sent resumes, references, and polished candidates, but none seemed right until a soft-spoken woman walked into his home. Her name was Naomi Carter. She wasn't like the others. She didn't wear an expensive suit or hide behind rehearsed smiles. She was warm, with kind brown eyes and a gentle touch. A single mother herself, she knew what it meant to hold a baby with both love and patience. Clara, fussy and restless with strangers, melted in her arms almost instantly. Alexander hired her on the spot. If you've watched up till this point, do well to comment where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories like this one. Now back to the story. Weeks passed and Alexander kept his distance. Naomi took over the night feedings, the lullabies, the soft rocking in the nursery. He convinced himself it was best for Clara and for his sanity. But one night, fate pulled him into a moment he could never have prepared for. It was late, nearly midnight, when Clara's cries pierced the halls. Alexander, restless and unable to sleep, walked quietly toward the nursery. The door was half open, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. He stepped closer, intending only to peek inside. And then he froze. Naomi sat in the rocking chair, her blouse undone, Clara nestled against her chest. His daughter was breastfeeding, not from a bottle but from Naomi herself. Alexander's breath caught. A storm of emotions raged inside him: shock, confusion, even anger. His first instinct was to step in, to demand an explanation, but something stopped him. Clara wasn't crying, she wasn't restless. For the first time in days, she looked utterly at peace. Naomi's eyes were closed, her face calm but tired. She looked nothing like an employee in that moment, she looked like a mother. And that terrified him. Alexander backed away before Naomi noticed him. He paced his study for hours, his mind a battlefield. How dare she, he thought, this was overstepping boundaries, trust, everything. But then another voice whispered, would you rather see your daughter hungry and screaming? Would Isabella have wanted that? By morning, his anger had simmered into confusion. He couldn't fire her, not yet, not without knowing why, but he also couldn't ignore what he saw. The next day, he summoned Naomi to the study. She entered nervously, cradling Clara in her arms. Close the door, Alexander said, his voice colder than he intended. Naomi obeyed, her brows knitting in worry. I saw you last night, he said flatly, in the nursery. Her face paled instantly, her arms tightened around Clara protectively. Mr. Grant, I can explain. Then explain, his eyes narrowed, piercing, because what I saw was not part of your job description. Naomi swallowed hard, tears already brimming. Clara wouldn't stop crying, she was hungry. The formula wasn't enough, she kept rejecting the bottle. I didn't plan it, I swear. But I still produce milk. My son is only a year old. When Clara wouldn't calm down, her voice broke. I couldn't just watch her suffer. Her words hung in the air. Alexander stared at her, his jaw tight. You should have asked me. I know, Naomi whispered, her voice trembling. And I'm sorry, I crossed a line. If you want me to leave, I will, but please, please don't think I meant any harm. I only wanted to help her. Clara cooed softly in her arms, blissfully unaware of the tension. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. His mind screamed at him to fire her, but his heart, the heart that saw his daughter finally at peace, hesitated. That night, Alexander found himself staring at a photo of Isabella. She was holding a friend's baby at a charity gala, her smile radiant, her touch tender. She had wanted a big family, she had dreamed of breastfeeding, of rocking her children to sleep. That dream had died with her. And yet through Naomi, a piece of it seemed alive. Clara was thriving, not just surviving. Could it be wrong then, or was it the only right thing left? Days turned into weeks and Naomi continued caring for Clara, though now under Alexander's watchful eye. He didn't stop her from breastfeeding, but he didn't openly approve either. It was an unspoken arrangement, heavy with tension. But soon the whispers started. The house staff, maids, chefs, even the driver began to gossip. They noticed the closeness between Naomi and Clara, the way Alexander lingered longer in the nursery now, watching them with unreadable eyes. "Have you heard?" one maid whispered. "The nanny, she's feeding the baby, not with bottles, with, well, you know." "That's not proper," another muttered. "Boundaries are boundaries, what if people find out?" One afternoon, Alexander's sister, Victoria, dropped by. Sharp-tongued and fiercely protective, she caught Naomi nursing Clara in the garden. Her gasp was loud enough to make Naomi flinch. "What on earth is going on here?" Victoria demanded. "Alexander, do you know about this?" The confrontation that followed threatened to undo everything. Alexander stood his ground against Victoria's outrage, but her words cut deep. "You're letting a stranger replace Isabella. What will people say when they find out the millionaire's nanny is playing mother to his child? It's disgraceful, Alex, disgraceful." But when he looked at Clara, healthy, calm, and happier than ever, he wondered if society's judgment mattered more than his daughter's well-being. Naomi, tears in her eyes, whispered, "I can leave if I'm causing trouble, just say the word." And Alexander, conflicted and weary, replied with something that even surprised himself. "No, stay." That night, as rain lashed against the mansion windows, Alexander found himself packing once again. He wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. He wasn't sure if this strange, fragile arrangement would heal or destroy them all. But deep down, a truth was slowly taking root. Naomi wasn't just saving Clara, she was saving him. And what he would do next would change everything. Naomi stayed. Despite Victoria's outrage, despite the staff's whispers, despite the icy stares Alexander often gave her when he caught her nursing Clara, Naomi stayed. And Alexander let her. At first he told himself it was practical. Clara was healthier, calmer, gaining weight faster. Nights were easier, mornings brighter, but the truth was more complicated. In the quiet hours when he saw Naomi rocking his daughter, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. But the peace was fragile. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors found their way outside the mansion's walls. It began with the driver, who let it slip to another staff member's cousin who happened to work at a local boutique. Soon, murmurs spread through social circles. Alexander Grant's nanny is breastfeeding his baby. By the time it reached the tabloids, the story had twisted into scandal. Millionaire's widow hires nanny to replace late wife. The article was cruel, filled with speculation and doctored photographs. Paparazzi camped outside the mansion gates. Cameras flashed every time Naomi stepped out with Clara, and her quiet walks in the garden became front-page gossip. Alexander raged. He fired half the staff for leaking information, but the damage was done. One evening, Naomi stood in the kitchen, clutching a crumpled tabloid. Her hands shook as tears streaked her cheeks. "Mr. Grant," she whispered when Alexander walked in, "I can't stay here anymore. This is destroying your reputation. People are calling me horrible things, a thief, a usurper. Even worse," she glanced at Clara, her voice breaking. "They're saying I'm trying to take Isabella's place." Alexander's jaw tightened. He took the paper from her hands and tossed it into the fireplace. The flames devoured it instantly. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "They don't know you, they don't know her." Naomi looked at him, startled by the protectiveness in his tone. "But why defend me?" Alexander's eyes lingered on Clara before meeting Naomi's again. "Because my daughter sleeps peacefully for the first time in months, because you've given her something I couldn't, and because—" His voice faltered. He didn't finish the sentence. But Naomi heard enough. Just when Naomi thought things couldn't get worse, a shadow from her past resurfaced. Her ex-husband, Darius Carter, had abandoned her and their son a year earlier. A man with charm but no soul, he disappeared when responsibilities grew heavy. Naomi hadn't heard from him since until now. He showed up at the mansion unannounced, grinning like a wolf. Well, Darius drawled as the butler hesitated at the door. "Look at you, Naomi, living large, millionaire's nanny, raising his kid, breastfeeding like she's yours. Smart way to climb, baby." Naomi froze, horror flooding her face. Alexander appeared behind her, his presence towering and cold. Who is this? Darius smirked, extending a hand as if this were some casual business meeting. I'm her husband, technically still married, though she likes to forget. Thought I'd come see how my wife's doing. Naomi's knees nearly buckled. Don't listen to him, he left me, he hasn't cared for me or our son since the day he walked out. Alexander's stare darkened. Get out now. But Darius only chuckled, his eyes glinting with malice. Or what? You'll sick your lawyers on me? Careful, Mr. Grant, the press would love to know you hired a married nanny who nurses your kid like her own. Might even sound like a love story or a scandal. The threat hung in the air like poison. Later that night, Naomi sat trembling in the study. I swear to you, she whispered, I want nothing from him. I left that life behind. I only care about my son and Clara. Alexander's voice was low but steady. Then we'll deal with him. He wants money, doesn't he? Naomi shook her head. He wants power, he always has, and if he senses this arrangement between us is more than it should be, he'll twist it to destroy you. Alexander leaned back, exhaling sharply. He had faced hostile takeovers, boardroom betrayals, billion-dollar lawsuits, but this was different. This wasn't about business. This was about trust, family, and the fragile bond forming in his home. In the days that followed, Alexander grew closer to Naomi, not by choice but by circumstance. She was more than Clara's nanny now, she was a shield against chaos. One evening, he found her asleep in the nursery chair, Clara nestled against her chest. For a long moment, Alexander simply watched. His heart twisted painfully. Naomi looked so peaceful, so maternal that Isabella's absence felt sharper than ever. But instead of grief, he felt something new, something dangerous, something that scared him. He felt drawn to her. The way her laughter filled the halls again, the way she stood her ground against his sister's accusations, the way Clara clung to her as though she were the only safe place in the world. Alexander shook his head, scolding himself. She's the nanny, nothing more, don't be foolish. But the heart rarely listens to reason. One stormy night, Alexander received a phone call that made his blood run cold. It was from his lawyer. Alex, I don't know how to tell you this, but someone filed an anonymous report with Child Services. They're investigating claims that your nanny is, how do I put this, exploiting your daughter, breastfeeding her for her own gain, manipulating her way into your home. They're suggesting neglect, even emotional harm. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles whitened. Who filed it? The lawyer hesitated. Your sister, Victoria. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. The next day, two stern-faced social workers arrived at the mansion. They questioned Naomi relentlessly, inspected the nursery, and even examined Clara's medical reports. Naomi held back tears as one of them asked, do you admit to breastfeeding this child without the father's initial consent? Yes, she said, her voice steady despite trembling hands. But not out of malice, out of love, out of necessity. She was hungry and I couldn't ignore that. Alexander stood beside her, his presence like a shield. You'll find Clara healthier than ever, you'll find no neglect here, only care. But the social workers weren't the only threat. Tabloids picked up the investigation instantly, splashing headlines across every page. Millionaire's baby in danger. The nanny scandal grows deeper. For Alexander, it wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about protecting Naomi from a world determined to vilify her. That night, as thunder rumbled outside, Alexander found Naomi crying quietly in the nursery. I should leave, she whispered, her voice broken. For your sake, for Clara's, I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. Alexander stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. His voice was low, fierce. No, if anyone leaves, it won't be you. I won't let them take away the one person who's saving my daughter. Naomi's eyes widened, her tears glistening in the dim light. For the first time, she saw not the cold, grieving millionaire, but a man fighting for something real. And deep inside, Alexander knew the truth he'd been denying all along. Naomi wasn't just the nanny anymore. She was becoming the heartbeat of his home. But with Darius lurking in the shadows, Victoria plotting in secret, and the press tearing their lives apart, what would he do next? What he decided would not only change Clara's future, It would change all of theirs forever. The mansion no longer felt like a home, it felt like a fortress under siege. Cameras lined the gates, flashing like lightning whenever Naomi stepped outside with Clara. Tabloids screamed headlines about scandal and betrayal. Social workers loomed, ready to judge every move. And in the shadows, Darius circled like a vulture, waiting for the right moment to strike. But perhaps the deepest cut came from within. Alexander couldn't stop replaying his sister Victoria's betrayal. She had claimed she was protecting Isabella's memory, but all she had done was feed Clara into the jaws of gossip-hungry wolves. And Naomi, she was unraveling. Each day she grew quieter, more withdrawn, yet when she held Clara, her hands remained steady, her love unwavering. One evening, Alexander returned from a meeting to find Darius waiting on the mansion steps, slick in a tailored suit he could never have afforded on his own. "Evening, Mr. Grant," Darius said with a smug smile. "Lovely place you've got, must be nice to have more money than God, shame if someone complicated things for you." Alexander's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "Simple," Darius leaned in, lowering his voice. "500,000 cash, I walk away and the world never hears about how your precious nanny is playing house in your mansion. No lawsuits, no custody battles, no stories about your late wife being replaced." Alexander's blood boiled. "Custody battles, you abandoned your son." Darius's grin widened. "Doesn't matter, legally Naomi's still my wife, which means anything she has, including her employment here, could be seen as our business. Unless, of course, you'd rather fight this out in court. Tabloids would love that." For the first time in years, Alexander felt powerless. This wasn't a hostile takeover in a boardroom, it was a hostage situation, and the hostage was his daughter's peace. That night, Alexander told Naomi everything. He expected her to break, to collapse under the weight of Darius's threat. But instead, Naomi's eyes burned with fire. "He's not taking one more thing from me," she said fiercely. "He took my dignity, my marriage, my son's stability, but he will not take Clara or you." Alexander blinked, caught off guard by her resolve. Naomi placed a trembling hand on his. "I'll fight him, even if it ruins me, because for the first time in years I feel like I'm part of something real again." Something in Alexander shifted at that moment. Grief had chained him for so long, but Naomi's courage lit a flame inside him. For the first time since Isabella's death, he felt alive. Meanwhile, Victoria's plan began to unravel. She had expected applause for protecting her niece. Instead, her betrayal backfired. Donors began pulling out of her charity events, accusing her of hypocrisy for dragging her brother through scandal. The public wasn't applauding her loyalty, they were condemning her cruelty. One evening, she confronted Alexander, her voice sharp. "Don't you see, she's manipulating you. Naomi's not your salvation, she's your replacement." Alexander's reply was cold as steel. "You don't get to decide who saves me, Victoria, and you don't get to weaponize Isabella's memory to control my life." For the first time, Victoria was silent. She saw something in Alexander's eyes she hadn't seen in months: conviction. Weeks later, the battle came to a head in court. Darius had filed a lawsuit claiming Naomi's employment blurred marital assets and demanding custody rights over their son, a move designed not to win but to publicly humiliate. The courtroom was packed with reporters. Naomi sat trembling, her son beside her, Alexander at her side. Darius swaggered in, all false charm and arrogance. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "my wife has been compromised, living in luxury, nursing another man's baby. Tell me, is that the behavior of a fit mother?" Gasps echoed through the room. Naomi's face flushed with shame, but Alexander stood. His voice was low, deliberate, and filled with authority. "Your Honor, let's be clear. This man abandoned his family. He left his wife penniless and his son fatherless. Naomi has not only cared for my daughter when I couldn't, she has done it with a love this man wouldn't recognize if it hit him in the face." The judge raised a brow. "Mr. Carter, do you currently provide financial or emotional support for your son?" Darius shifted uncomfortably. "Well, not directly, but—" "Answer the question," the judge pressed. "No. And yet you demand control over a woman and child you abandoned." The courtroom murmured with disapproval. Darius's grin faltered. In the end, the judge dismissed Darius's claims entirely, granting Naomi full legal independence and custody of her son. The courtroom erupted in whispers, the tide of scandal suddenly turning. That night back at the mansion, Naomi collapsed into tears of relief. "It's over," she whispered. "For the first time in years, it's really over." Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes soft. "No, it's just beginning." Naomi looked at him, confused. "For months, I thought keeping distance from Clara was protecting me from grief. But it was killing me, and then you came, you gave her a mother's love when I couldn't give her a father's, you saved us both." Naomi's breath caught. "Alexander." He stepped closer, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know what this is yet, I don't know if I'm ready, but I do know one thing: you are not just the nanny anymore, you're family." Tears filled Naomi's eyes, but this time they weren't from sorrow. Months passed, the tabloids moved on to newer scandals, the paparazzi disappeared, and the mansion grew quiet again. But inside, it was no longer silent. Laughter echoed in the halls, Clara's giggles mingled with Naomi's son's playful shouts, and for the first time since Isabella's death, Alexander smiled without guilt. One evening, as the sun dipped over the Hudson River, Alexander watched Naomi rock Clara to sleep. He thought of Isabella, not with pain this time, but with gratitude. Life hadn't gone the way he planned, it never does, but sometimes love comes in the most unexpected of ways. And sometimes healing begins with a scandal the world calls wrong, but the heart knows is right. Alexander stood in the doorway, his daughter safe in Naomi's arms, his home filled with warmth again. A widowed millionaire saw a nanny breastfeeding his baby, he thought, and what he did next changed everything. Because instead of anger, he chose understanding. Instead of judgment, he chose compassion. And instead of living in grief, he chose love. The lesson was simple but eternal. Family isn't always bound by blood. Sometimes it's forged in sacrifice, in courage, and in the quiet, unexpected moments that save us when we least expect it.